Hi everyone, welcome to Casual Watch Talk Live for our exciting discussion about Rolex inventing titanium. We think they invented the titanium watch. Uh,
Absolutely.
well, I am joined by my co-host Patrick. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, no problem. Glad to be here.
Yeah, should we before we get started though, there's some very important business that we need to get to before we get started. And this is Patrick, your pocket watch time channel is within a hair's breadth of the it's nearly at 1,000 subs. It's so close.
Yep, I'm so close. My real analytics though, I'm at about 40 away from 1,000, but I'm about 800 watch hours away. So I'm going to hit 1,000 before I hit the 4,000. So anyone out there who wants to just put me on in the background and stream me for the afternoon
Don't
while
say
you're at
that.
work, take full
Legitimate watch
advantage.
hours. They have to be legitimate watch hours.
They're watching. They're just watching. They're multitasking.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but any of those things, fantastic. But yeah, thanks for the shout out. Yeah, it's my 1 year anniversary, so it's just kind of funny that I'm so close to crossing the finish line right at 1 year.
Yeah, I think it took me a lot longer than a year. It was quite difficult to get to 1,000 early on. I think because there was only a few channels kind of doing the watch thing at the time that I started about 7 years ago. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, well, we'll say hello to everyone. Hi, Bill. Hey, Kevin. Thanks for joining. Cherished, of course. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Well, before we tonight's discussion is going to be all about. It was a bit tongue in cheek, saying that Rolex invented the titanium watch, but we're gonna focus on titanium case watches. We've got quite a few watches that we've each picked ourselves that will, some really good quality titanium watches. But we thought, because this is perhaps a subject, if you're new to watch collecting, you would wonder about titanium in general, like why is it used, why isn't it used all the time, why wouldn't you use it? So Patrick, you did a great little slide here to do, because you're the metal guy. You wanted to talk us through what is
Yeah.
titanium.
Well, the quick easy is just being the science nerd that I am. I've always loved metals, and whether it be titanium, with carbon fiber, tungsten, any cool watch material, I'm a fan of. Here's where it gets weird, though. I'm actually not that big of a fan of titanium as a watch material, and we'll get into that sometime during the day. But the common names we hear, and this is just why I put these four on this little slide, was you hear Rolex and their wonderful 904L steel, and you hear everybody else out there with their 316L steel. And really all it means is that it's just a different alloy of steel. And I think for 904 steel, they actually add molybdenum, which is, a weird element that nobody's probably ever even heard of. But a little increased concentration of that increases its shine and it increases its ability to polish, but it actually decreases its ability to take a scratch. And so for anyone out there who's got a polished Rolex and you say, dear God, this stuff's a scratch magnet, it 100% is. And it's the fault of 904L steel. Your cheap 316Ls actually are more scratch resistant. And
Yeah, I mean, I scratched my book. I'm not wearing my Rolex. I just remembered we haven't done a wristwatch check. We'll do it after this. But yeah, I even the clasp on my new Rolex has the high polishing down the center, and I definitely scratched it. I was in a business meeting. I was wearing a shirt with cuffs, and it scratched even off the cuff, even the friction between the cotton and the steel. So you're right, it is very scratch prone. Which
yeah,
is
and then I was gonna say, and then jumping to today's theme with the titanium, the two titaniums we always hear about is grade 2 and grade 5.
yeah.
And grade 2 basically is pure titanium. It is actually an alloy, but it's almost pure. And the advantage of it being pure is that it actually has better corrosion resistance than grade 5, but it does not have the scratch resistance. And so for most actual nautical applications, they use grade 2 because it's actually more corrosion resistant. Now, I remember in the awesome pitch for you, Sam. Your interview with Mike France, someone had made a comment, hey, the body of the watch is made in grade 5, but the bracelet was made in grade 2. And they did that, and Mike, being Mike, is completely transparent and honest, said we had to do it for cost cutting because grade 2 is a lot cheaper to produce than grade 5. But the other thing is, grade 2 actually makes for a better water resistant watch, as crazy as that sounds. But it is not as scratch resistant though, which is what I think Watch Chris made on his episode. He had said that he thinks he's already scratched up his bracelet a little bit because grade 2 is a little bit more fragile than grade 5. And so, the moral of this long-winded slide and talk is, for every advantage to a metal, you kind of make a disadvantage. There is no perfect alloy. Otherwise, we'd all use that perfect alloy. So grade 5 gets the polish and the shine and a little bit of sturdy, but it's less water resistant. And similarly, steel has its positives and negatives as well. So just kind of interesting fun facts.
Yeah, and I used to make the mistake early on saying that titanium. I made a couple when I was starting out. I forget where I got it from, but I thought titanium was more scratch resistant than steel, and I was wrong, because in some cases it's more scratch prone, isn't it, than the steel? I think grade 2.
Yeah,
And
grade 2 is.
And titanium is a separate metal, isn't it? It's they mine it, don't they? Titanium, and then they make it into an alloy.
Well, titanium is actually an elemental metal, and so it is a pure metal, where steel is a made up conglomerate of iron and carbon and a bunch of other little tinier metals. So yes, pure titanium you can find in the ground and mine it and ore it and do all that fun stuff with it. And I guess based on purity you can create other alloys.
Yeah, and its uses in watches are mainly, I would say, for its strength to weight ratio, isn't it? Is very good. So you make a normal watch lighter, or you can make very slim watches much better in titanium, can't they? So I think the Octafismo is titanium, isn't it? And I think the Richard Mille, the ultra thin Ferrari is I think it's titanium as well, isn't it? Just because of its strength to weight ratio.
Yeah, and so you can see the last little thing there on each one was just the densities, and then in general, steel is about a density of about 8, and titanium's about 4.5. So titanium truly weighs about half as much. And so if you've got a big bulbous super watch, which is one of the choices that I picked out of our ones, putting that watch in titanium is actually beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was our little science lesson. So let's jump into the main event here. So let me just remove this. Okay, so we picked some interesting watches, but I think what kicked the whole thing off was the Rolex. So Rolex, if you weren't familiar, released this just ginormous titanium watch with I think 11,000 meters in water resistance. And why it's significant is that this is the first watch that Rolex have ever made in titanium, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas other manufacturers have been using titanium for a long time. Omega has been using it for a long time. Seiko, Citizen, some of these watch companies have been using it for years. But this is, and I think honestly, if you made this in steel, it would be brutally big. I would encourage you to have a look online or look on Facebook. There's some people that have done a side by side comparison between this and the Deep Sea, and it is monstrously big. So
monstrous. I saw in someone's WhatsApp group, someone I guess saw one in the store, and so they've got it on their wrist, and I mean it dwarfs your wrist. I mean, it looks like you're wearing a hockey puck.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? I mean, this will sell because it's Rolex, and I own a Rolex. I'm a Rolex fan, but I'm not sure quite what the point of this is. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand what the point of making this watch is. I mean, other than to prove you can make a watch that it can go to that depth, but the Deep Sea also can go pretty deep, and that's much less,
Yeah. I
size-wise.
mean, I think you nailed it right there. I mean, it's pretty much just a big flex. I mean, it's the same as what you talked about with the Ferrari, Richard Mille, and Bulgari fighting for slimmest watch. I mean,
Mm.
they're making a watch that's a fraction of a millimeter thinner than the other and going, "Yay, we won!" These companies are making dive watches that every human would be crushed down to nothing. Your watch will survive, but you won't. So it truly is pointless, but it's just a, hey, look, we did it. And and as you said, for this watch, I mean, I think they had to do titanium. To me, this watch brings up the question of, and you hear people saying, oh, now they've introduced it, so will they bring titanium into other models? And to be honest, I don't know if this necessarily opens the door. I think they did it just because they really had no other choice. I mean, this watch, I forget what the weight is, but I read it somewhere. I mean, it's heavier than I thought it would be, even though it is titanium. So, I mean, it is truly just a giant chunk of a watch. And who knows, it would weigh 2 pounds if it was steel.
Yeah, it's fun. So Orange Hand here has put, is it just coincidence that James Cameron made Titanic and Rolex made this watch in titanium? I think what's more of a coincidence is James Cameron's got a make or break film coming out very soon in Avatar 2. And if he messes that Avatar 2 up, there's another 3 in the pipe, I think. So I think he's definitely trying to do the rounds after it took him, 12 years to make the second Avatar. So, but we'll see. Okay, well that was a start. Also, we haven't included in here, which we perhaps should talk about as well, is that and I should have put them in, but Grand Seiko makes some like incredible titanium cases, don't they? Where they polish them almost to look like steel.
Mm-hmm.
I just remembered that now. We hadn't included one on the list here. Maybe I'll add one in the end. But let's go through our picks for interesting titanium watches. So first up, Patrick, this is yours. This is the king, the Paul Thorpe special.
Well, so here's where I'll have to introduce, let's say, all of my choices for the day, because as I kind of said earlier, I really don't like titanium as a metal for a watch. I dislike it. Grand Seiko is probably one of my favorite brands. I've liked them before they even became moderately popular. And I always envisioned myself owning a snowflake until I tried on a snowflake. And I was just so like ewed. It feels not impressive. And if you don't have a giant chunky monkey of a watch in titanium, I just don't think it really works. So for me, I mostly chose pretty big watches that benefit from titanium versus just choosing titanium because you can.
Okay, this is an interesting point because I went the other way on it. So this will be an interesting conversation. So this is why you picked this one. I've tried this watch on, and it's unworldly light. It doesn't make sense mentally because of the sheer heft of the watch. Actually seeing it, I think I saw there's a rose gold one, isn't there? I think, or it has
Yeah.
gold inlays, and
Yeah.
it's otherworldly how light it feels.
I was gonna say I just tried one on for the first time a couple weeks ago when I was in New York, because you can only get the Ploprof at a boutique, and I'm too lazy to drive a couple hours to Orlando to try one on. But they had one there, and I tried it on, and I mean, it is a ginormous watch. It does actually wear pretty well. I think it fits my wrist. Do I think it looks good on my wrist? Probably not, but I definitely still think it's my favorite Omega. So maybe someday I'll pick one up. But definitely, I think this watch would be ungamely huge if it was in steel. And I know they make it in steel, but I think this watch benefits from titanium.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I haven't included it in the list here yet because we've done we've done 2 or 3 consecutive shows on this. But the Bel Canto, of course, the Christopher Ward new Bel Canto, which is stunning. Hopefully, I'm getting one for review to borrow for review. So I'll show you, and I'll talk about how that benefits from having titanium as well. Well, I went the other end, and I went to a company called Boulder, and they make I think the majority of their line is in titanium, but this Venture Field Watch is just really cool. They not only do they make the watch in titanium, but the buckle on the tang and the buckle and the keepers are also in titanium as well. And I think their cases are so well machined. They're geometric. They're uh, they're brushed, not polished, and they're not really brushed. They kind of have that kind of I forgot what you called it, the sandy sort of look to it.
Sandblasted.
Sandblasted look. That sandblasted look to it. Yes, but they make an absolute cracking watch. They really do. I've reviewed this one automatic, which uses the NH. Oh, this one actually, yeah, NH35A. They used to do a quartz, which I wish they'd bring the quartz back, but they also do that. The Medic watch. They do a whole host of watches in titanium, and I think these Singapore and Hong Kong based companies really run away with the idea of using titanium, some of them exclusively. I've got another one coming up as well that uses titanium almost exclusively. But if you've not heard of Boulder, definitely worth checking out. They have I have reviewed for them on the channel before. They've sent me watches in, so just full disclosure. But they do make a great case, great chronograph as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never tried one personally, but I've only really heard good things about the brand.
Yeah. You get a lot for your money. $300 for a,
Wow.
$300 for an automatic titanium watch, field watch. I think is a steal, and they do good sales as well. So anyway, next up on the list here, you have. Oh, this is Oakson Junior. So this has made a second showing. We
Yeah,
last week. Yeah.
If Oakson Jr. hasn't found me yet, I'm a fan. So if you guys ever want to send me a watch, I will gladly review it. But they actually just did something new with this model, which is actually insanely reasonable, to use a word that may not make sense. But they just like metals. Like they'll sell you a watch in stainless steel and silver and brass, and most of them are in titanium, but they've made a new line which they call the Oaks line, and pretty much this is their non-bespoke variant, and so you can just get it like this. And I think they've got 3 color choices. I think this one's actually my favorite. But what I find so amazing about this is, one, you get a beautiful raw titanium case, and I just think the raw nature of it kind of gives it a fun elemental look. So it doesn't look as titanium-y to me, and I think that's just because it's just unfinished, and that's kind of their way. But what's most amazing to me is, this is an annual calendar for about $5,000. I mean, that is one heck of a complication for that price. I mean, Omega makes one, and I think that might be in the $7,000-8,000 range, but I can't think of another brand where you can get pretty much a relatively, in-house module on top of an ETA base to give you an annual calendar. And I just think it's kind of a cool design. So I just can't sing enough praises to this brand that maybe someday will get a little bit of publicity and steam and take off.
Yeah, so this is interesting as well. I was trying to work this out. So this is actually this is the days of the month, isn't it? So it's the 6th here. January is the 1st here, and then this is the Friday. So it must be, yeah. So it must go around that way then, mustn't it? Finishing in.
Yeah. So I think actually the small wheels, as weird as it is, I think they go counterclockwise, and the big wheel, the date wheel, are regular clockwise. And so I think it is a little bit sort of odd, but I guess to enable for them to make a annual calendar module with 5 extra pieces, I guess they couldn't get the direction to go kind of in our normal way. But I mean, what just an interesting, unique design to package an annual calendar. And they love their titanium, so they picked, I think, only titanium for the Oaks line, which is their non-bespoke variant.
Yeah, absolutely. So James Duffy says, I chose to buy a titanium Grand Seiko because of its slightly darker and warmer tone. The lighter weight certainly helps with how thick and top-heavy Grand Seikos can be.
Yeah,
Um,
depends on the Grand Seiko, but you're right. Some of them are a little bit heavy because they're thicker. I can definitely see it for the Grand Seiko dive watches because those are pretty big boys. So
yeah.
that would be definitely one I'd probably go titanium for.
Next up on my list is another brand. This is another brand that I think exclusively uses titanium. So this is Razor or Rise. They changed their name halfway through. This is another one that's very kindly sent me a watch in for review, but I was like super impressed with how they do. But again, these are sort of really good value. $500 for I think these are NH35As. Let's have a look. NH35A, which is probably the upper of what I would pay for an NH35A powered watch, but very well machined. Again, very geometric, and the way that the bezel works really well on these as well. And I'm going to show an example of a titanium watch where the bezel didn't work well. And I think I don't know if you agree. I think that's the trickiest thing to get with a titanium watch, isn't it? Like a good bezel action on them.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but you're right. You don't see too many bezeled titanium watches, so that does make it a little bit more rare.
Yes, yeah. It's not but they do a fantastic job, and this is what always makes. I've got an Omega on the list as well. I've got a couple of Omegas on the list actually, but and I remember I've got the No Time to Die one on here as well. Spoiler alert! But they made a big song and dance Omega about the titanium case, and it definitely was a lot more expensive than its equivalent at the time. I thought, I thought, all you have to do is a little search online and look at companies like this and realize that there's people doing great things in titanium that isn't costing the earth to actually machine them. I know it is more complicated to machine titanium, but they're not adding that huge premium on like Omega did. But
Mhm.
okay, it's next on the list. Oh wow, this is a crazy one. I didn't look at this one when I added it.
Well, I actually owned this watch a really, really, really long time ago because this is an older watch that has since fallen away. But it's just when I think of titanium watches, I always jump back to this one because it's just such a interesting design and so big. And I probably before I had a real job, I this was pretty much my daily wear watch for about 10 years. And it was kind of a pricey watch even back then. And you know, I had an interesting business during college selling rip-off DVDs of Japanese movies, copyright, and
We do not condone the copyright infringement.
well, I mean, that was 30 years ago, so I'm sure the statute
Statute
of
of
limitations
limitations.
is over. But as a college kid, it gave me a bit of an allowance that I bought myself a really fancy Seiko that I actually saw in the Bahamas. And so we went on a cruise ship, and whatever port they dropped us off in, I went into some jewelry store. I think my girlfriend at the time was looking for tanzanite because that's what you do when you go to the islands. And I saw this watch and I fell in love with it and bought it, and as I said, wore it every day for 10 years. And for this watch, the titanium definitely worked. It just felt wonderful, and
Yeah.
it just was such a comfortable watch. It really just melded to your hand, and I loved it. So as I said, just a blast from the past. Whenever I see this watch, it gives me good memories. So besides being the negative guy for titanium, I thought I'd put a rosy memory in there.
And so Roar of the Tiger saying, doesn't Jay Leno wear one of these Seikos? Is
Yep,
that right?
he's made it a little bit famous because I guess Jay Leno, like me, loves the watch because he still wears it today. So the bad news about this watch though is it has a capacitor because it's one of their kinetic watches, and so when that capacitor dies, the only fix is to send it back to Japan, and it was pretty much about a $900 fix 20 years ago, and 20 years ago me said no way, and so I sold it off.
So that's the interesting thing is that because the Kinetic kind of died the death, didn't it? Because I remember when it first came out and it was revolutionary, wasn't it? it was before, because there was solar watches before, but they weren't really. They didn't have the ability to store, I don't think, a lot of energy, whereas kinetic really came along. But I guess that was that must have been the death, maybe, was the capacitors.
Probably. I mean, I said in a world of watches where we want to say that it's forever. I mean, the back of the movement. If you click over to some of the pictures, this movement actually was a Grand Seiko Studio movement in a non-Grand Seiko Seiko. So, because this is, I guess, the 9T82, and so any watch movement from Seiko that has a 9 in front of it is made in the micro artist studio version of Grand Seiko. And this movement is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. The bad news, though, is there's an internal battery hiding somewhere in there, and once that thing dies, they have to disassemble the whole watch to pretty much replace that battery. So if you want a watch that you've got to spend $1,000 for every 10 years, well, this is the watch for you. But if not, as I said, I had to give it up. So I sold it. And what's funny is it got a little bit of popularity. I think I sold it for as much as I bought it 10 years earlier. So it's like a Rolex, it kept its value.
Well, yeah, that's the crazy thing about some Seikos, aren't they? I think especially the 62 MASs and stuff like that, they've probably increased more percentage wise than the equivalent Rolex. But this watch is also showing the other thing with titanium, that it does sometimes show up a lot of fingerprints and grease, doesn't it? And that's one thing we didn't mention.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, next on my list is I've owned this watch and it was really cool. It's a small field watch, a Citizen, and it uses I'm going to get this name wrong, but it's like a super titanium or Duro titanium that Citizen make. Actually, I think it says it on the back here. No, it doesn't. So it's like a highly scratch resistant titanium, I think, or they've at least manipulated it to be more scratch resistant. I wonder if it says it somewhere. I should have looked up this before. Sorry, everyone. But it was real. I wore it. This was like my pandemic watch. I since sold it because I got really wrapped around the axle that the minute hand was shorter than it should. It went to the edge for some reason. But this was my pandemic watch, and I wore it a lot, and it hardly scratched. The other thing with this as well is it's a Japanese only one, so you have to download an app on it. Sets itself through the radio mast, so you have to download an app on your phone that then simulates the Japanese mast, and then you can set the watch that way. But it was a great little field watch. The titanium bracelet was actually extremely uncomfortable, so I never wore it on the titanium bracelet for some reason. But it was a great little watch. Mine was actually the black version. I actually really like this green one, but I think Seiko Citizen do a great job with their titanium. And like I said, this was one of the titanium watches, and it was a smaller watch. It did feel lighter, but it didn't feel toyish, which I guess is another issue that you can sometimes have with titanium.
Yeah, that's kind of my issue, is that they sometimes feel a little toyish. But I've heard of Citizen's hardening technique. I don't remember the name either, but similarly, Zen, they make their tegmented steel, but they also make a hardened titanium. And supposedly, as you said, it's pretty darn scratch resistant.
Yeah, so Keith's saying Citizen calls it super titanium. I think you're right. I think it is called super titanium. Although it might be, maybe there was like a Jura coating on something. I remember Jura being in there as well, but yeah. So next up on the list is one of yours, Patrick. This is the Blancpain.
Yep. So I'm just a fan for the bathyscaphe, which is this version of it. And what really caught my eye on this little article was they're introducing even a new titanium that I've never heard of. So
really?
If you go down to the bottom of this one, this is grade 23 titanium, and I'm like, wow, something new.
Michael Jordan titanium.
Yeah, something new to even the metal nerds. But they pretty much say it's just a bit of a harder, grade 5. So it's not that big of a difference, but this is just a 43 millimeter dive watch, and it's relatively pretty thin because Blancpain makes relatively pretty thin watches. So, does this need to be in titanium? Probably not, but just the fact that it really is such a rugged dive watch, I don't think titanium is a bad thing for it. And kind of like someone was saying earlier with Grand Seiko, I think the color works well for it. So
Yeah.
sometimes it just gives it a bit of a darker, warmer feel. And, with that dial, I mean, I think titanium just works better than stainless steel would. So I just think that's a really beautiful watch.
Yeah, I've always been very interested in the 50 Fathoms, but this one, there's something about the hands that I don't like. I don't like the syringe style hands. Because everything else is sort of round, isn't it? The indices and the for some reason I just can't. But I don't mind them on other watches like Phoebus and stuff like that. For some reason, there's just I just can't. I can't fathom it, to use a pun on these. But yeah, beautiful looking watch.
Yeah, and that's what makes the watch hobby so much fun. As I said, you can find that one little thing about a watch that just turns you off, and then it's not for you. But you're right. I always kind of thought that about the Zen U50 hands. Is just they're very weird hands. Even though I bought one, so I guess I got over it. But they're very, yeah, the Zen U50 or U1, their hands are just very blocky. I think they actually look kind of like the Blancpains.
Oh yes, yes, you're right. Yeah,
They kind of look like Legos, and so they're just a bit odd.
Yes, yeah, but highly legible, aren't they? But I think even I think they might work even better than the blind pound ones because the indices are also rectangular on these, aren't they? Versus it's not round like the blind pound ones.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like a round.
Yeah. Oh, they're the Blancpain one's so much more elegant.
Yes.
The Zen one is just very blocky. But I said I bought that watch. I'm still waiting for it. Hey Zen, send me my watch, please.
Oh, did something go wrong with it or?
No, they released something called the Zen U50 Professional, and so they released 150 of them. They sold out in 2 hours, and I have one number 127. But I guess they're making them one at a time because I bought it 6 months ago and I still haven't heard anything. So someday.
Yeah, I would be. I'd be climbing the walls with that. Well, next on my list is another Citizen, which is the Montbell, which is I believe it's a sportswear brand, like an outdoor brand, Japanese outdoor brand. But I've seen one of these and I think they look awesome. And it was actually a difficult choice between this one and the previous one that I bought as well. But again, I've got to hand it to Citizen. I think this is a monoblock case as well, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, really, really like what Citizen do with their titanium watches, and they also make a lot of the other ones, like their pilots watches. I mean, I'm sure there's some down here that are titanium as well. They seem to have really adopted titanium into a lot of, considering they're a main brand, adopted it. I think a lot more than even Seiko's standard range. You don't really see a lot of titanium in, whereas Citizen seem to have really made that part of their kind of personality. So,
Do you know what Montbell stands for?
Montbell is actually it's a sportswear brand, so it's a co-branded one. So let me just Montbell. I believe it is, where is it? Montbell Outdoor Clothing and Equipment. So it's like it's like what Abercrombie and Fitch used to be, or I guess I don't know, like Dick's Sporting Good, but I don't know whether you'd want
Yeah,
Dick's
so
written on
it's
your.
like the LL Bean because doesn't Todd
Yes,
have he's got an LL Bean marketed something,
yes.
but okay, yeah, I've never heard of Montbell. I guess us Floridians we don't have these stores. I've never heard of it.
No, I don't think there is any in. I don't think there is any in America. I think it's. I can't actually see it down here. Yeah, I think it's a Japanese or it's not a US one. I think you can obviously buy it off on this website if you're in the US, but I don't think there's any brick and mortar stores. Okay, next up is one of yours. This is a titanium Panerai, and I don't think I'd seen a titanium Panerai before.
Well, kind of going with my theme of, titanium really, its use isn't a big boy watch. I had to bring my good old friend Panerai into the game because, Panerai fell out of style a little bit. I mean, there's still the Paneristi and some Panerai lovers like myself out there, but I still think it's just one of the most distinct case shapes you see. I mean,
Yep.
you can spot a Panerai from across the room, and I just love that about it. And the Luminor and the Submersible are my favorites versus the Radiomir because they've got the classic crown guard. But you're right, they do make titanium watches, but they don't make as many as you'd think, and it is kind of surprising to me that they don't. And if I was to go down the titanium rabbit hole with a Panerai, I'd want it to have something a bit more fun to it because most of them are kind of like this one. They don't have too much going on, but at least this one had an 8-day power reserve because the one that really bugs the crap out of me is there's one that's an 8-day power reserve with no power reserve indicator. And
Right.
I feel like you'd be twisting that thing for like a week and you wouldn't know if you were on day 6, day 7. Like I at least want to know if I'm close because yeah, I would go insane. So at least this one makes it usable for me. But just a good excuse to throw a Panerai on the mix because I think it's a watch that would benefit from titanium.
Yeah, this is probably for another show, but I've always wanted to buy a Panerai, and I've probably been in the used one sort of price range, but they're very hard to buy used, aren't they? Or they're, at least you have to be very careful about buying them used because there's a lot of fakes, isn't there, out there? Or at least there's a lot of fakes of a lot of watches, but I think the Panerai ones are especially hard to.
Yeah, particularly if you've got a closed caseback one. I mean, it's similar to a Rolex in terms of, it's a lot harder to fake a watch when you can see what you're faking. And if the grand majority of Panerais, at least sort of the real diver ones, had solid casebacks on them. So you have no idea what's in there, and the case shape itself is pretty simple. I mean, you can go on eBay and you can find a sort of a pretty bland Unitas movement holder, which is shaped like a Panerai. And so for the pocket watch guy and me, there's tons of pocket watch conversions to wristwatches using a more or less Panerai form because they are just so copied. So yeah, they're definitely, you gotta know what you're buying. Similar to like buying vintage Rolex, you gotta know whether you've got a Frankenstein watch or if you've got the real deal. So and I don't know enough about vintage Panerai to know.
Yeah. No, I don't either. So James Duffy put here, going back to the grade 23 is similar to grade 5, but has lower oxygen, nitrogen, and iron. It has better. I don't know what that is.
Ductility.
Yeah, and fracture toughness than grade 5 titanium. There you go.
Yeah, it's a little bit stronger.
Yeah. Okay. Next up on the list was so Pete's saying, is one of us going high and one of us going low? I think it's just I've got cheaper tastes. But here's one. So I included this on the list because I mean we had to for titanium watches. So this was one of the first 300-meter titanium that they did for No Time to Die, and they really made a song and dance about this. And I think the reason that it makes the list for me is I don't actually like this watch, and it's personal preference. They went way overboard with the Fotina on this one. And it doesn't have the date. Like it should have the date on it. I don't know why. I mean, he's traveling internationally. He needs the date on a watch. But I think why it's definitely deserved on this list is because of, not necessarily because of the watch itself, but the fact that they made the mesh out of titanium as well, which was really cool.
Yeah, I like that.
The actual mesh bracelet is also titanium as well. So they went, and I think that's why it's well deserved of a place on this list, was creating a titanium mesh bracelet as well.
Yeah, for me, I actually think it's one of the nicer looking Seamasters. The only thing, as I completely agree with you about the Fotina, though, in my brain, I just say it's colored. So if I look at it and I just say that they just made it like an ecru color versus, you know, a Fotina, then I can
Yeah.
like. But yes, if I'm supposed to pretend that this is supposed to look vintage, then I don't like it because nothing about the watch looks vintage. And that's where it kind of is a bit of a tug of war. So coloring, I like the color because I don't want it to be a bright white. I think that would kind of not make sense.
Yeah.
But when you call it a Fotina, you're right. I definitely don't like that concept. But I think it's a beautiful watch. Only thing that gets in my way is I don't really want the British Army symbol on there just because
The
I
crow's
don't.
foot.
Yeah, I don't really want branding, you know, that isn't real. So if it was a real military watch, fine. But
Yes.
yeah, I don't want fake branding.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, my thing with Fotina, and I've ranted about it on the podcast before. All this is that it's they've aged it to make it look like old radium, and I think radium is the last thing that needs to be celebrated. It was probably the worst material that was ever used in watchmaking, and I don't know why there was this sudden nostalgia for it. But anyway, moving on, I think we've run out of your choices, but I've added a couple of little cheeky ones on for
Mm-hmm.
us to talk about. So next up is a Hamilton, and I know this is this isn't like me because it doesn't have the date, but this was I thought it was interesting. So it's a titanium Hamilton that they so Hamilton very well known for their movie tie-ins. And this also has Fotina on it, I guess. But this one is actually tied in with a video game called Far Cry 6, which
Okay.
is based. It's loosely based in Colombia. They made like a fictitious island, but it's loosely based in Colombia. So this watch actually features a lot in the game, and I played the game. It's quite good, but I thought it suited the character. It was weird because it suited the character of the game, even though I'm also conflicted about whether there should have been a watch, like a brand like Hamilton should tie in with video games. I mean, I know there's been a long history of video game tie-ins. Like there's that very famous Casio that was in Metal Gear Solid, but yeah, but I think they made a good looking watch. It's very if you've played the game, it's tied in very well to the game. Like it's actually used in the game, the watch, and it
It's
comes
a
in a
nice
tin.
box. Do
Yeah,
do most Hamiltons come in that nice of a box, or is
no,
that a?
no, they come in like a tin, don't they? Sometimes they come in like a aluminium or aluminum sort of clamshell, don't they? But yeah, this is unique.
Yeah, it comes with a watch roll at the bottom and a box. That's a really nice little piece of kit.
Yeah, yeah, it actually suits the game. But yeah, another great little titanium watch there. Next up on the list, I had to go into the Omega archives for this. So this is the original X33, which is the watch that it's been into space a ton of times. The most recent one, it went up with the Dragon. So this is the first iteration of what is now the X33 Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
And the X33, the reason it's called the X33 is it got its name from, I believe, a prototype plane, a space plane that was going to be used, that was called codename X33, and Omega kind of adopted it. But this watch, I had it on the titanium bracelet, and although it wore quite well, and it did benefit from the lightness of the titanium, the problem with this watch is that the LCD is behind, so this isn't lit, but usually it has the time on it, or it has the date, or something like that in a circle. Have you ever seen one of these, Patrick?
I haven't seen one in the flesh. No, I mean I'm very familiar with it in pictures and just history, but no, I don't think I've ever seen one actually like on the wrist.
Yeah, the problem with it, the problem that I had with it was that the actual contrast between the LCD and the hands, it looks a lot better here, but in real life, it's actually quite hard to distinguish the hands from the LCD. Certainly, the one I had that had been aged. Um, but yeah, this one had interesting bezel action. I think they got it almost right, but it definitely felt lighter, the titanium bezel on this, and I'm sure the current Skywalkers have improved that, although I've never seen one in person. But yeah, I can't. This was a watch, an Omega watch that I'd lusted after since I for years, since I was first ever into watches. And then it was kind of like one of those don't meet your heroes. And when I actually eventually got it, I didn't really like it that much. So I actually sold it that quickly that I didn't even do a review on the channel of it. I
Wow.
posted, there's pictures on Instagram. Well, what happened was I bought it, and one of the problems that they have is that the alarm doesn't work, or the actual mechanism for the alarm fails, and that's what happened on this. So I had to send it back to the place I got it from, and it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I was without it for 3 months, and then I don't know if you've ever had this where you get a watch back from repair and then you feel like, oh, is something else going to go wrong with it? So I felt like something else might go wrong with it. So yeah, but a great watch. I would definitely buy a new Skywalker, one of the new ones, if they ever got to like a reasonable price.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had an Annie Digi Breitling as well. So Real Tool Watch, Breitling Aerospace, Apple Watch, Garmin are titanium or plastic, but never steel. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Real Tool watches. Yeah, that is an interesting point. And of course, the Casio Frogman as well. We're missing that one as well. That one is, although it's rubber on the outside, its actual module is housed within that titanium inner section of the Frogman. Next up, this is a watch that failed spectacularly for me on the bezel action, and I own this. This was a Fortis Classic Cosmonaut titanium. This isn't the one with. They're commonly in steel, and it's the one that Roscosmos use, and they're commonly in a chronograph configuration. Whereas this was a three-hander, that. Yeah, this failed this just didn't get the bezel action right. It felt, you could really hear it. You know, when you hear it like crunching, it was just not. I was not feeling. I actually got it from Joma Shop and I returned it, and it was fine returning it.
Was it? Is that a rubber crown? Do they have a?
No, it's just they've just PVD coated it for some reason.
Huh. Yeah, because
It's not
that's.
screw down either. It's not a screw down crown, but it has a water resistance.
I'm gonna say that's the thing that keeps catching my eye. I'm like, why is the crown black? So I wonder why they chose that.
Yeah, the other thing as well, which doesn't show well in this photo, but I think because the dial is supposed to be a chronograph, there's a lot of like empty space on the dial. So when you actually see it, it looks like there's a lot of empty space on the dial. So oh, Jason's popping in to say hello. Actually, one of the pics on here is Jason's pick. So it is where, hopefully I've not lost it here, but he sent over the Helm Vanatu as well as a great titanium watch. So just let me pull that one up. I actually had it on here. So this is another one that's a great value titanium watch as well. So this is the Vanatu titanium watch. There's actually a waiting list for these, and Jason was on a waiting list for quite some time, but he got a call, I think, or at least he got an email about it. But yeah, this is a really large watch, but everything is titanium, even the engineer's bracelet as well. Apparently, the bezel action is quite good on it as well.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's a big watch. So as I said, for me, that's the perfect joining of a watch with titanium, because then you can really wear it and still feel like you've got, you know, something substantial on your wrist, but it's not weighing you down.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. As Jason says, he couldn't have been happier with it. Awesome.
Yeah, because he had the stainless steel version,
yes.
I believe. And so then he finally got the titanium one, and I'm guessing that means he likes the titanium even better than the steel.
Yeah, he actually sent me some photos, but I was having problems downloading them to get them uploaded into here. But he sent me some photos of, I'm sure they're on his Instagram, so check out Watch Rolling Instagram. His Instagram page there. He's actually got the two different weights, and there is a substantial weight difference on between the two. Okay, let's have a look right here. Okay. And then let me go back here. The other one here is, we did Cosmonaut, and then, oh, that was yours as well. So yeah, I think actually the Cosmonaut was the last. Well, the Vanatu was the last one that we had on there, and I mean, there's loads that we've missed as well, isn't there? There's
Well,
Oh,
the one that I
pause.
know we need to touch base on is the new Christopher Ward.
Yes.
So at least to show that to the screen one more time, even though
Yeah.
I'm sure the entire watch world knows of this heroic story.
Yes. So we've if you've I'm sure anybody watching this knows that I've been I uploaded an interview with Mike about this, and we did a Q&A with Mike on the Sunday show, which you should definitely watch that. Even if you're just a watch fan in general, we were asking all sorts of questions about design and function and everything. But yeah, this is if nobody's seen this, this is the new bel canto, isn't it? And it's actually the components inside are titanium as well, aren't they? The hammers and the gong, as they call it, are titanium.
Yeah.
And then I forget what he said. He said the case was grade 5.
Yeah, the case is grade 5 because I guess the resonance of grade 5 titanium is much better than grade 2, which just goes to show you what a small change in alloy can do. But yeah, the case is grade 5 for sound, and the if you got the titanium bracelet, it's grade 2.
Yeah, and it's also got a titanium case back as well, which is for a solid case back, which is to help with the resonance of the sound. I can't wait to actually see this in person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
I
it's
know it.
absolutely beautiful. I would have pushed the button, except I want a little greater water resistance. So maybe in the future, even though maybe water resistance would muffle the sound, so maybe there's a reason they couldn't do it. But for me, in my daily life, I need something with a little better water resistance. But I think it's an absolutely gorgeous watch, and for all the 300 who got the blue, congratulations, and for the 300 who are getting the green, congratulations, because it's a pretty special watch.
Yeah, and where am I sitting? Yeah, Mark put another great titanium watch on here as well. I've reviewed the I've reviewed this version, but I've reviewed the Colchester one, which has the injected carbon case. But yes, the Christopher Ward do make this titanium watch, the Sealander Elite. It's got this fantastic system of where the crown recesses into the case. So it's
Mm.
actually a push. So you push it in and the crown pops out. I imagine it probably works quite well on the titanium one. The Colchester one I had was brand new, so it wasn't. It was kind of a bit funky, but yeah, the not funky in a bad way. It just was. It kind of like slowly comes out. I think because of the seals were new. But yeah, I like got a full review on the channel. But yeah, the Sealander Elite is also a titanium watch.
Yeah. How does that make the stem feel when you're winding? Is there sort of a jiggle to it because it moves so much, or is it pretty sturdy?
No, no, it's very sturdy. And the thing is, there isn't a picture of it, so you'll have to watch my review. But when the crown comes out, I was expecting it to come out as more of like a tube, where it's like a tube that came out, but it doesn't. It actually comes out more like a head of a nail, where it's like it comes out on a stem, and then there's like a head on it to wind it with. So I thought it would come out as one single piece, like a tube, but it isn't. It's like a nail basically that comes out, but it works well once you get used to it. I suppose it's not great if you struggle winding watches because of like finger dexterity or whatever. It is a little bit harder, I would say, than a normal crown to wind because there's not that surface area there. But for anyone that doesn't have issues with winding watches, and also it's automatic.
Yeah, yeah, pretty neat. I don't think I've ever seen that model, but it's just a fun little difference to have that crown pop in, pop out.
Oh, here we go. So Pete's saying grade 2 isn't actually considered an alloy. It's regarded as commercially pure titanium.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of what I was saying too. I was like, we kind of call it pure, but it's not really, but it is. So it's kind of a wishy-washy land of purity. But yeah, I guess that's the more pure version versus all these other alloys, which makes me wonder what's grade 1 then. You'd think if it was the most pure, they'd at least start at the bottom, but that's weird. They start with 2. I didn't do homework on grade 1, so I don't know what that is.
Well, I think we've come to the end of all our picks there. I know I'm going to be kicking myself because I'm sure I've missed some fantastic titanium watches. We didn't go into any of Grand Seiko sort of territory either, did we? But
no, and I said, there's definitely tons of good ones out there. I said for me, I was just trying to find something that maybe had something a little bit different to it. But titanium, even though let's say Rolex is going to say they're RLX, which of course the internet is making fun of them so hard, just calling it grade 5. That's all it is. It's a pretty normal metal. So I don't think there's too much song and dance for titanium anymore. It's not like a hard to work with metal. Kind of like you said, there's $200 watches out there that are full titanium. So for anyone who's singing and dancing and saying that titanium is this super hard metal to work with, sure, it's a little harder, but I don't think it's that out of the box. And what we sort of talked about today is if it has a good reason, use it. If not, then stick to stainless steel or some other fun metal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. Very much appreciated. Thank you for being so active in the comments. We always love reading those comments. And we'll see you on Sunday. There's not going to be a Tuesday show next week because I'm on vacation. But there'll definitely be a Sunday show. And then the Sunday after that, fingers crossed, we should have another special guest from a British watch company joining us as well. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. And don't forget to subscribe to Patrick if you've not. Pocket Watch Time, if you've not already subscribed, get him to that 1,000.
Yeah,
all right, guys.
Thanks everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks for watching. Bye.